He didn't announce it. She didn't either. A 46-year-old woman who won her last Grand Slam doubles title before her new partner was even born just walked onto a court with a 21-year-old who hadn't won a single WTA singles title of her own 2 weeks earlier. And within 14 days, that same young woman beat a top 3 seed to become a champion. That is not a coincidence. That was a decision only one person could see the value of at the time. Stay with me. Before the Mubadala DC Open, Eala stood in front of a room full of reporters and said something most 21-year-olds would never say out loud. She said no. Venus Williams, a living legend of the sport, a woman with more Grand Slam titles to her name than Eala had played professional tournaments, had offered her a place on the doubles court. And Eala turned it down. Not out of fear, out of honesty. She said Venus deserved a partner who could give everything, physically and emotionally, and that fresh off a clay court transition. She wasn't that partner yet. Watch the clip back and you'll see it in her face. This wasn't rehearsed. It was a young woman carrying the hopes of an entire nation, choosing the harder truth over the easier lie. Most players her age take the photo op and figure out the rest later. She looked in the mirror instead. Sobeys Stadium in Toronto was not quiet the night they finally played together. Over 10,000 seats and more than 5,000 tickets sold before the match even had a court assigned to it, sold simply because fans had spent weeks asking one question, over and over: when is Eala playing? The match was originally scheduled for a smaller side court, tucked away from the main draw spotlight, the kind of court reserved for names nobody expects a crowd for. Organizers had to move it, upgrading the venue just to keep up with a demand nobody had forecast. Philippine flags filled every section, draped over railings, waved by hands that had waited years for a moment exactly like this one. One name kept echoing through the stadium walls, chanted in rhythm, rising every time she touched the ball, dropping into silence every time she paused to breathe. You could hear it before you could see her. But behind all that noise stood two players who had shared a court together only 3 times before. 3 times. On the other side of the net stood Miyu Kato and Liudmila Samsonova, a pairing with 3 doubles titles between them. The kind of chemistry that isn't built in a weekend. The kind that only comes from losing together long enough to learn exactly where your partner's racket will be before she swings it. The new partnership had passion, and a crowd, and a story the world wanted to watch unfold in real time. But passion, under center court lights, against 2 players who already know where you're going to be standing before you get there. Passion alone rarely closes out a set. This story doesn't begin in Toronto. It begins in Bad Homburg, on grass, the first time these 2 names ever shared a scoreboard. Nobody expected much from it: a trial run, a favor, a line in a tournament recap nobody would remember by September. Instead, they won their opening match together, a start clean enough to turn heads in a locker room that doesn't turn easily for anyone. Williams said afterward that she'd love the chance to play together again if it ever came around. At the time, it sounded like a polite line. It wasn't. From there, Eala carried that same self-belief straight into her singles season, each result a little louder than the last. A 4th-round finish at Wimbledon quietly raised eyebrows among people who track these things for a living. Then Washington, where in a single week she beat an Olympic champion, beat the tournament's defending champion, beat a 4-time Grand Slam winner, and in the final, under rain that refused to stop, beat world number 3 Jessica Pegula. 4-6, 6-4, 6-love, a comeback stretched across a delay that pushed the match into a second day. Players and fans sitting in silence, waiting to see if the story would even get to finish. That win pushed her to a career-high world ranking of 20. For the Philippines, it was the first time a woman had carried their flag to a WTA Tour-level singles title. Not a final, not a semifinal, the whole thing. That was the peak. And in every story like this one, the peak always arrives with a cost attached. Quietly, in fine print, nobody reads until later. Because the decision Eala made in Washington, walking away from Venus, had a price nobody shows in the celebration clips. Her doubles ranking slipped while the cameras were pointed somewhere else. Some called it a mistake, a wasted chance to share a court with a legend who might not offer that chance twice. Venus kept playing doubles with a different partner that week. The tournament moving forward exactly as tournaments do, indifferent to any one player's doubts. Eala walked her singles path alone, answering to no one but the scoreboard. There was no collapse in that, no breakdown, no headline meltdown for the cameras to circle. Just a deliberate, tiring decision made by someone who understood her own limits better than anyone commenting on it from the outside ever could. Sometimes the biggest risk in a career isn't the one you take in front of 10,000 people. It's the one you make quietly, when there's no scoreboard around to prove you were right. There's another layer to this setback that rarely makes the highlight reel. Venus wasn't just any legend to turn down. Across singles and doubles combined, she has stood at the very top of the sport, 23 Grand Slam titles, 4 Olympic gold medals, 3 decades spent redefining what longevity in tennis is even supposed to look like. Saying no to her wasn't just turning down a partner. It was turning down a piece of history that doesn't offer second chances often. Eala knew exactly what she was giving up. She said as much herself that she was grateful for the opportunity, that she hoped it would come again. But hope isn't a plan. And she wasn't going to pretend that it was. That is exactly what made her more dangerous when she returned to Venus in Toronto. Because the same choice that looked like a step back in July was the same decision that turned her into a singles champion in August. And a champion who walks back onto a doubles court is not the same player who left it 3 weeks earlier. Hours before stepping onto SoBe Stadium, Eala had just finished a brutal 3-set singles battle against Alicia Parks. Her legs were heavy. Her lungs were still catching up. Her mind was not tired at all. She had said, after Washington, that she was leaving every tournament in better shape than she entered it, learning something new about herself with every match she survived, treating exhaustion like data instead of an excuse. Venus, on her side of the net that night, didn't carry the weight of 14 Grand Slam doubles titles like a burden. She carried the calm of them instead, the stillness that only comes after you've already proven everything you needed to prove. To people who stopped doubting you decades ago. 2 generations standing on either side of the same net, one still hungry, one still calm. Both somehow speaking the exact same language without needing to translate it. Here's the twist no highlight reel will ever show you. The very thing that separated them, the experience gap. 3 matches together against 3 titles won as a pair by their opponents is the exact thing that put them in front of the entire tennis world. A partnership without a real head-to-head record walked onto center court not because the record books demanded it, but because a nation demanded it, loudly, until organizers had no choice but to listen. Kato and Samsonova had the titles. Eala and Williams had something the titles couldn't buy, a stadium that already belonged to their name before a single ball was struck. The setback that should have made them irrelevant, that should have buried them on a side court, is the exact thing that made them the story everyone in that building came to watch. Sometimes the gap between 2 players isn't a weakness. Sometimes it's the entire reason people show up. This was never only a tennis story. It's about the specific feeling of being underestimated, because you don't have the history yet only a name people are just starting to learn how to pronounce correctly. People across the Philippines have felt that their entire lives, hearing their country's name spoken on a stage that size and feeling, for once, like it actually belongs there, like it isn't borrowed. People across America have watched Venus, deep into the years of a career that should have ended by any reasonable measure, chase the game with the exact same hunger she carried at 19, refusing every quiet exit she was ever offered. This is a partnership where one half is pure hunger and the other half is a legend, quietly writing her own closing chapters, refusing to let anyone else write them for her. And when the 2 of them stand together at a net, something in the crowd shifts, something you can feel even through a screen. The world stops for a second, because everyone watching, at some point in their own life, has felt overlooked, has felt like they were 3 matches away from finally proving they belonged. That feeling doesn't care what country you're from or what language you dream in. It travels. And this is only the beginning of it. Eala plays Cincinnati next, another hard court, another test of whether Washington was a moment or a shift in who she actually is. Then straight into the US Open at Flushing Meadows, entering the biggest stage in the sport as one of the highest-ranked players of her young career, a place she couldn't have honestly imagined standing in 6 months ago. If this partnership with Venus survives even 1 or 2 more tournaments, no doubles draw in the world will take them lightly again, not after Toronto. Not after what that stadium sounded like. And if her singles form holds through the rest of the hardcourt swing, the next name to break into the top 15 in the world might very well be hers. And nobody watching tonight will be able to say they didn't see it coming. This is not the finished version of her. Nobody watching Toronto that night was watching a finished product. They were watching the first few pages of something much longer, still being written in real time, one decision at a time, most of them made far away from any camera. So go back to that decision in Washington, the no that could have looked from the outside like a mistake. It wasn't. That no is exactly what made the yes, weeks later, big enough for the whole world to notice. Big enough to fill a stadium that wasn't even built for them. A 46-year-old legend and a 21-year-old who had shared a court only 3 times together walked into that stadium anyway, and by the time the lights went down, they had made it theirs. There is a version of this story where Eala never says no, where she plays it safe, takes the double slot beside Venus in Washington, and nobody ever hears about a singles title at all. That version exists somewhere, in some quieter timeline one where the flags never come out in that number, and the chants never get loud enough to hear from outside the gates. It just isn't this one. In this one, she chose the harder road on purpose. And the harder road is exactly what made Toronto possible. Tell me in the comments, do you think Venus and Eala's partnership makes it all the way to the US Open, or was Toronto a moment that doesn't repeat itself? Because in a few years, when everyone knows this name you'll want a record of when you knew first.